Imagine finding out on your wedding day that your partner's family has a dark past of racism. Now imagine that you're black. This is just the beginning of the story of Zuri and Ethan, an interracial couple who find themselves at the center of a battle that goes far beyond their love. Hello, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any stories. The morning sun seeped through the curtains of the hotel room in Boston, where Zuri Johnson was preparing for the most important day of his life. Her fingers trembled slightly as she adjusted her veil in front of the mirror, reflecting not only her image, but also the expectations and anxieties she carried. "Take a deep breath, darling," said Amara, her best friend since her college days at Harvard. "You look absolutely stunning." Zuri forced a smile, but her eyes revealed an inner storm. What if I'm not good enough for his family, Amara? What if they never really accept me? Amara put her hands on Zuri's shoulders, their eyes meeting in the reflection. "Listen to me, Zuri Johnson. You're an incredible, successful, and compassionate woman. If they can't see that, it's their problem, not yours." Amara's words brought a little comfort, but didn't completely dispel the clouds of doubt. Zuri thought of her own family, especially her grandmother Esther, who had expressed concerns about interracial marriage. "Are you sure you're ready for this, my dear?" Esther had asked weeks before, her voice laden with years of difficult experiences in the American South. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Olivia, her younger sister, entering with a beaming smile. "Hey, future Mrs. Prescott. Ready to marry the man of your dreams?" Zuri laughed, grateful for Olivia's positive energy. "Almost there. I just need a moment to pull myself together." Meanwhile, a few blocks away, in another hotel room, Ethan Prescott stared at his reflection with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. His blue eyes, normally full of confidence, now revealed a vulnerability rarely seen. "You look great, man," said his best friend Alex, adjusting Ethan's tie. "Zuri will be speechless." Ethan smiled weakly, his hand unconsciously touching the prosthesis on his left leg, a constant reminder of the accident that changed his life at the age of 18. "Sometimes I wonder if she really knows what she's getting into, Alex. Marrying someone like me." Alex interrupted, his voice tight. "Someone like you? You mean an amazing guy who overcame adversity to become one of Boston's most respected lawyers?" "Yes, she knows exactly what she's getting into." Alex's words brought a genuine smile to Ethan's face, but they didn't completely erase his worries. He thought of his mother, Catherine, and the tense conversation they'd had the night before. She had seemed nervous, almost guilty, as if she was hiding something. "Ethan, darling," she had said, her voice trembling slightly, "are you sure about this? About marrying? Well, you know." He had cut off the conversation abruptly, irritated by the implication in his mother's words. Now, hours before the ceremony, he wondered if there was more to that hesitation than he had imagined. A ring on his smartphone brought him back to the present. It was a message from Zuri. "I can't wait to see you at the altar. I love you." Those simple words momentarily dispelled his doubts. Ethan took a deep breath, straightened his shoulders, and turned to Alex. "Come on. I've got a bride waiting for me." As the two groups made their way to Trinity Church in Copley Square, the scene was set for a ceremony that promised to unite not just two hearts, but two families, two cultures, and two different worlds. Guests began to arrive, filling the pews of the historic church. Zuri's college friends, Ethan's fellow lawyers, family members from both sides, some visibly uncomfortable, others overjoyed. As the moment of the ceremony approached, the tension and anticipation were palpable. No one could have predicted that this day, which was supposed to be one of pure celebration, was about to turn into a test of love, loyalty, and understanding that neither of them had imagined. The organ of Trinity Church intoned the first notes of the wedding march, and all eyes turned to the entrance. Zuri, radiant in her white dress, began her walk down the center aisle, her father, Dr. William Johnson, at her side. Each step was a mixture of anxiety and joy, her eyes fixed on Ethan, who was waiting for her at the altar. Ethan felt his heart race at the sight of Zuri. At that moment, all his insecurities seemed to melt away. He remembered the day they met, 3 years ago, at a civil rights conference in Washington, D.C. The connection was instantaneous, transcending racial and physical differences. When Zuri reached the altar, Ethan held out his hand, their fingers intertwining as a symbol of their union. Reverend Michael Anderson, a longtime friend of the Johnson family, began the ceremony with words about love, commitment, and overcoming. "We are here today," said Reverend Anderson, "to celebrate not only the union of Zuri and Ethan, but also the strength of love that overcomes barriers and defies expectations." As the Reverend spoke, Zuri noticed something strange. Catherine, Ethan's mother, looked uneasy, exchanging nervous glances with her husband, Robert. Zuri tried to push away the worry, focusing on the words of love she was about to exchange. It was time for the vows. Ethan went first, his voice firm but emotional. "Zuri, since the day I met you, you've brightened my life in ways I never imagined possible. You saw me beyond my physical limitations. You loved me for the person I am. I promise to be by your side at all times, to face every challenge together, and to build a future based on respect, understanding, and unconditional love." Tears glistened in Zuri's eyes as she began her vows. "Ethan, you taught me the true meaning of strength and perseverance. Your love has made me a better, more compassionate person. I promise to be your partner in all aspects of life, to celebrate our differences and grow from them. Together, we will create a home where love overcomes any obstacle." The exchange of rings was a moment of pure emotion. Both men's hands trembled slightly, aware of the profound meaning of the gesture. After being declared husband and wife, Zuri and Ethan sealed their union with a passionate kiss, applauded by the guests. The joy was palpable, but a keen eye could notice the underlying tension on some faces in the front row. The reception that followed was a vibrant celebration in the ballroom of the Fairmont Copley Plaza Hotel. Music, laughter, and lively conversation filled the air. Zuri and Ethan circulated among the guests, thanking them for coming and sharing moments of joy. It was during one of these interactions that the day took an unexpected turn. Zuri was chatting with Dr. Marcus Taylor, an old friend of her father's and Professor Emeritus of African American History at Boston University. "Zuri, my dear, I'm so happy for you," said Dr. Taylor, his smile warm. "You know, it's amazing to see how things change. Who would have thought that Gerald Prescott's granddaughter would be marrying a black woman?" Zuri felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. "I'm sorry, Dr. Taylor, but I don't understand. Who is Gerald Prescott?" Dr. Taylor's smile faltered, realizing his mistake. Well, Gerald Prescott is Ethan's grandfather. He was quite well known in certain circles in the 1960s. For not very positive reasons, unfortunately." Before Zuri could question further, Ethan appeared at her side, smiling, unaware of the conversation that had just taken place. "Hey, love, shall we cut the cake?" Zuri forced a smile, her mind spinning. As they walked to the cake table, she couldn't stop thinking, why had Ethan never mentioned his grandfather? And what exactly did Dr. Taylor mean by not very positive reasons? The rest of the reception passed like a blur for Zuri. As they cut the cake and danced their first dance as a couple, her mind was distant, full of unanswered questions and a growing sense of unease. As the evening progressed, Zuri knew she needed to confront Ethan about this revelation. But how could he broach such a delicate subject on his wedding day? And more importantly, how would it affect the future they had promised to build together just a few hours earlier? The full moon hung over Boston as Zuri and Ethan arrived at the bridal suite of the Four Seasons Hotel. The glow of celebration was beginning to fade, giving way to a silent tension that hung between them. Zuri felt the weight of unspoken words, while Ethan, oblivious to the storm brewing, smiled with the typical joy of a newlywed. "What an incredible day, isn't it?" Ethan said, loosening his tie as he sat on the edge of the king-size bed. His eyes shone with happiness, contrasting with Zuri's distant expression. Zuri stood, her restless hands adjusting and readjusting the strap of her dress. "Ethan," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I need to ask you something." The change in Zuri's tone made Ethan straighten up, his expression turning from joy to concern. "What is it, love? Did something happen?" Taking a deep breath, Zuri decided to get straight to the point. "Who's Gerald Prescott?" Ethan's face paled visibly, his eyes widening in shock. Where did you hear that name?" "Dr. Taylor mentioned him at the reception," Zuri replied, watching Ethan's reaction carefully. "He said that Gerald is his grandfather, and that he was known for not very positive reasons in the 60s. Ethan, what does that mean?" Ethan stood up, running his hand through his hair in a nervous gesture. "Zuri, I don't know how to explain it." "Try," Zuri insisted, his voice mixing frustration and hurt. "Why haven't you mentioned your grandfather before? What did he do that's so terrible that you hide it from me?" Ethan walked to the window, looking out at the city lights as if seeking courage in the distant stars. When he finally turned around, his eyes were full of guilt and sadness. "Gerald Prescott, my grandfather. He was an activist against racial integration in the 1960s, Ethan confessed, his voice almost a whisper. "He led protests, made speeches, things I'm not proud of at all." Zuri felt as if he'd been punched in the stomach. "And you never thought it was important to tell me this? Especially knowing who I am, where I come from." "I wanted to tell you, Zuri," Ethan pleaded, taking a step towards her. "But the more time passed, the harder it became. I was afraid of losing you." Zuri stepped back, creating distance between them. "Afraid of losing me? Ethan, we've just got married. How could you keep such a big secret?" "I'm not my grandfather, Zuri," Ethan argued, his voice laced with emotion. "I repudiate everything he stood for. That's why I chose to become a civil rights lawyer, to try to right the wrongs of the past." Zuri shook her head, tears starting to form in her eyes. "It's not just about your grandfather, Ethan. It's about trust. How can I trust you if you've hidden something so significant?" The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan tried to approach again, but Zuri held up her hand, asking for space. "I need air," she said, heading for the door. "I need to think." "Zuri, please," Ethan begged, his voice breaking. "We can talk about this. I love you." Zuri stopped at the door, turning to look at Ethan one last time before leaving. "I love you too, Ethan. But love without trust? I don't know if it's enough." With those words, she left, leaving Ethan alone in the suite, the weight of her secret finally exposed. Zuri walked down to the hotel lobby, her emotions in turmoil. She sat down on a far sofa, taking her cell phone out of her pocket. Her hands were shaking as she dialed the number of her best friend, Amara. "Nanny? I'm sorry to call so late, but I need you," Zuri said, her voice breaking. On the other end of the line, Amara answered immediately, concern evident in her voice. "Zuri, what happened? I'm on my way right now." Meanwhile, in the bedroom, Ethan sank onto the bed, his head between his hands. He picked up his phone, hesitated for a moment, then called his friend Alex. "Alex? I've ruined everything," he said, as soon as his friend picked up. As the evening progressed, what was supposed to be the start of a new life together turned into a moment of crisis. Zuri and Ethan, separated by just a few hotel floors, but emotionally distant, now faced the challenge of reconciling the love they felt with shaken trust and revealed secrets. The moon continued to shine over Boston, indifferent to the drama unfolding below, while the newlyweds wondered whether dawn would bring the chance of a fresh start or the end of everything they had built together. The rising sun painted the Boston skyline in shades of orange and pink, but for Zuri, the world seemed to have lost its colors. She was sitting on a bench in the Boston Public Garden, the place where Ethan had proposed to her just 6 months ago. Amara, true to her word, was by her side, offering silent comfort. "I don't know what to do, Amma," Zuri whispered, breaking the morning silence. "How could he hide something so important?" Amara sighed, choosing her words carefully. Zuri, you have every right to be hurt. But maybe Ethan really was afraid of losing you. Zuri shook her head in frustration. But don't you see? By hiding it, he betrayed my trust. How can I build a life with someone who hasn't been completely honest with me? Meanwhile, at the hotel, Ethan paced back and forth in his room, Alex watching him with concern. Dude, you need to calm down, Alex said, trying to reassure his friend. Zura's coming back and you guys are going to talk about it. Ethan paused, running his hand over his tired face. What if she doesn't come back, Alex? What if I've lost the best thing that ever happened to me because of a stupid mistake? Alex stood up, putting a hand on Ethan's shoulder. Look, what your grandfather did was horrible, but you're not him. You need to show that to Zuri. Back in the park, Zuri suddenly stood up. I need to talk to him, Amma. I need to understand why he did it. Amara nodded, a small smile forming on her lips. That's it, girl. Face it head on. With determined steps, Zuri returned to the hotel, her heart pounding in her chest. When she reached the door to the suite, she hesitated for a moment before knocking. Ethan opened the door, his red, puffy eyes showing the signs of a sleepless night. Zuri, he whispered, relief and fear mixed in his voice. We need to talk, Zuri said, entering the room. Alex, sensing the tension, mumbled an apology and left quickly. The silence between them was palpable. Finally, Ethan spoke. Zuri, I'm sorry, more than you can imagine. I should have told you about my grandfather a long time ago. Zuri stared at him, her eyes searching for answers. Why didn't you tell me, Ethan? Why hide something so significant? Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, inviting Zuri to do the same. She hesitated, but eventually sat down, keeping a distance between them. When we first met, Ethan began, his voice trembling, it was as if I had found a part of myself that had been missing. You saw me beyond my disability, beyond my past. I was afraid that if you knew about my grandfather, you'd see me differently. Zuri felt his anger subside a little, replaced by a deep sadness. Ethan, I love you for who you are, but part of who you are includes your history, your family. How can I really know you if you hide parts of yourself? Ethan nodded, tears forming in his eyes. You're right. I made a terrible mistake not trusting you, not trusting us. I want to make it right, Zuri. I want you to know my whole story, as painful as it is. Zuri took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the situation. I want to listen, Ethan, but I need you to understand that the trust we had, it's been shattered. It will take time to rebuild it. Ethan held out his hand, hesitantly, and Zuri, after a moment's hesitation, took it. I understand, he said softly, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to win back your trust. You're my life, Zuri. I can't lose you. They talked for hours. Ethan talked about his grandfather, about how he discovered the truth as a teenager and how it shaped him. He talked about his shame, his desire to be different, to be better. Zuri listened, sometimes with anger, sometimes with understanding, but always with love. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the room, Zuri and Ethan were exhausted, but closer than they had been in the morning. It's not going to be easy, Zuri said, her voice tired but determined. We have a lot to work on, a lot to overcome. Ethan nodded, gently squeezing Zuri's hand. I know, but if you're willing, I promise I'll do everything I can to make us the couple we promised to be yesterday at the altar. Zuri looked down at her wedding rings, symbols of a promise that now seemed simultaneously more fragile and stronger. I'm willing to try, she finally said, but we need to do it together, with complete honesty. As night fell over Boston, Zuri and Ethan stayed together, aware that their path would be difficult, but determined to face it united. The love that brought them together was being tested, but also strengthened, as they faced the truth and the consequences of long-kept secrets. The dawn brought with it a mixture of hope and apprehension for Zuri and Ethan. After a night of intense and emotional conversations, they decided it was time to face their families and the consequences of their revelations. Zuri decided to start with her own family. She and Ethan headed to the Roxbury neighborhood, where her parents, William and Adana Johnson, had lived for decades. The Victorian house, with its well-kept facade and lush garden, was a testament to the Johnson family's success and perseverance. When they arrived, Zuri hesitated at the door, her hand trembling slightly as she rang the bell. Ethan, sensing her hesitation, held her free hand, offering silent support. The door opened, revealing Adana's worried face. "Zuri, Ethan, what happened? I thought you'd be enjoying your honeymoon." Zuri took a deep breath. "Mom, we need to talk. All of us." Adana led them into the living room, where William was already sitting, an expression of confusion on his face. The silence was palpable as everyone settled down. "Dad, Mom," Zuri began, his voice shaking. "Yesterday we found out something about Ethan's family that, well, it changed everything." Ethan, gathering his courage, decided to speak. "My grandfather, Gerald Prescott, was an activist against racial integration in the 60s. I didn't tell Zuri that before the wedding." The shock was visible on William and Adana's faces. William stood up abruptly, his voice heavy with emotion. "You knew about this, and yet you married my daughter." "Dad, please," Zuri interjected. "Ethan isn't your grandfather. He's here now, being honest with us." Adana, ever the voice of reason, put a hand on her husband's arm. "William, let's hear what they have to say." For hours the room became the scene of an intense and emotionally charged conversation. Ethan shared his shame at his family's past, his struggle to distance himself from that legacy, and his deep love for Zuri. William, initially furious, gradually began to see beyond the Prescott name, recognizing the man his daughter had chosen. "It won't be easy," William finally said, his voice softer. "But if my daughter sees goodness in you, Ethan, then he'll try to see it too." Adana, with tears in her eyes, hugged Zuri and Ethan. "Your love will have to be stronger than the past. We're here to support you." Leaving the Johnsons' house, Zuri and Ethan felt a weight being lifted from their shoulders. However, they knew that the biggest challenge was yet to come, facing Ethan's family. The couple headed for the suburb of Wellesley, where the Prescotts lived. The imposing mansion seemed even more intimidating now that Zuri knew about its dark past. Catherine Prescott answered the door, her expression a mixture of surprise and guilt. "Ethan? Zuri? We didn't expect you so soon." Robert Prescott joined them in the living room, the tension palpable in the air. Ethan, holding Zuri's hand tightly, decided to get straight to the point. "Mom, Dad, Zuri found out about Grandpa Gerald," he said, his voice firm. "Why didn't you ever tell me the whole truth?" Catherine covered her face with her hands, sobbing silently. Robert, his face a mask of regret, spoke. "We wanted to protect you, son. Your grandfather's past. It's a stain on our family that we try to forget." Zuri, mustering all his courage, decided to speak. "Mr. and Mrs. Prescott, I understand that you wanted to protect Ethan, but hiding the truth only perpetuates the cycle of ignorance and prejudice." To everyone's surprise, Catherine got up and knelt in front of Zuri, tears streaming down her face. "Zuri, forgive me. When I first saw you and Ethan together, I was afraid. Not because of who you are, but because of who we were. You deserve to know the whole truth." In the hours that followed, the Prescotts shared painful stories of the past, of how Gerald had changed in the last few years of his life, bitterly regretting his actions. They talked about their own process of learning and growing, and how Ethan's love for Zuri had forced them to confront their own residual prejudices. As the sun began to set, Zuri and Ethan left the Prescott home with a new understanding. The road ahead would still be challenging, but now they had the truth on their side and the support of both families. In the car driving back to Boston, Zuri looked at Ethan. "That was intense," she said, a small smile forming on her lips. Ethan nodded, squeezing her hand gently. It was, but we're in this together, right? Zuri intertwined her fingers in his. Together. Always. As they drove back to the city, they both knew that this was only the beginning of their journey. There would be more challenges ahead, more truths to confront. But with honesty, love, and each other's strength, they were ready to face whatever obstacles the future might bring. 2 weeks after the family revelations, Zuri and Ethan finally embarked on their postponed honeymoon. They chose Martha's Vineyard, an island off the coast of Massachusetts, known for its natural beauty and rich history. The location was not a random choice. It was a symbol of their determination to face the past and build a future together. When they arrived on the ferry in Oak Bluffs, Zuri marveled at the colorful gingerbread cottages that adorned the streets. "It's beautiful here," she whispered, squeezing Ethan's hand. Ethan smiled, but his eyes revealed a mixture of emotions. "Did you know that this island has a fascinating history of thriving African-American communities, especially in Oak Bluffs?" Zuri nodded, surprised by Ethan's knowledge. "You've been doing some research, haven't you?" "Yes," he admitted. "I thought, well, that we should use this time not only to reconnect, but also to learn more about our shared history." The gesture touched Zuri deeply. It was a small but significant step in the right direction. Over the next few days, the couple explored the island, immersing themselves in its rich history and culture. They visited the African American Heritage Trail, learning about important figures such as Dorothy West and Adam Clayton Powell, Jr. Each stop became an opportunity for deep discussions about race, identity, and the future they wanted to build together. One afternoon, as they walked along Menemsha Beach, Zuri decided to broach a subject that had been on her mind. "Ethan," she began hesitantly, "have you thought about what it will be like when we have children? How will we explain to them about our history, about your family's past?" Ethan paused, staring at the horizon. "I think about it more than you know," he confessed. "I want our children to know the whole truth, the good and the bad. I want them to understand the importance of fighting prejudice, no matter where it comes from." Zuri felt a surge of love and pride. "You know, when I found out about your grandfather, I was scared, afraid that somehow that prejudice was in you too. But seeing how you're coping with it all, how you're striving to learn and grow, that means a lot to me." Ethan pulled Zuri into a tight hug. "I love you, Zuri, and I promise that I will always strive to be the best man I can be, for you and for our future family." The next day, they decided to attend a community event in Oak Bluffs, an open discussion about race and reconciliation. The event was being held at the Union Chapel, a historic site known for its role in the civil rights struggle. When they arrived, the hall was already full. People of all ages and ethnicities gathered, creating an atmosphere of expectation and hope. The moderator, Dr. Angela Reynolds, a renowned sociologist from the University of Massachusetts, opened the discussion. "We're here today to talk about healing, about how we can build bridges between our communities," she began. "Would anyone like to share their experience?" To Zuri's surprise, Ethan raised his hand. With an encouraging squeeze from Zuri, he stood up. "My name is Ethan Prescott," he began, his voice shaky but determined. "I recently discovered that my grandfather was an activist against racial integration in the 1960s. A murmur ran through the room, but Ethan continued. "I married a wonderful black woman, and together we are learning to navigate this painful past. I'm here today because I want to be part of the solution, not the problem." Ethan's words opened the floodgates. For hours, people shared their stories, their struggles, and their hopes. Zuri also spoke, sharing her initial fears and how love and honesty were helping her overcome them. At the end of the event, several people approached Zuri and Ethan, thanking them for their courage in sharing their story. One elderly woman with tears in her eyes hugged them both. "You give me hope," she said. "Hope that we can overcome the past and build a better future together." That evening, back at their seaside cottage, Zuri and Ethan reflected on the day. "You know," Zuri said, nestled in Ethan's arms, "when we decided to come here, I thought it would just be to reconnect. But this went much deeper." Ethan nodded, gently kissing Zuri's forehead. I think we've found our mission, haven't we? To use our story, our journey, to help others face the past and build a better future. Zuri smiled, feeling a surge of purpose and determination. Together we can make a difference. As the sound of the waves lulled the couple, they knew that their honeymoon had turned into something much bigger. It was the start of a new journey, not just for them, but for all those their lives would touch in the future. With love, honesty, and courage, Zuri and Ethan were ready to face any challenge the world could throw their way. 3 months after their honeymoon, Zuri and Ethan were back to their routine in Boston, but with a new perspective on their relationship and their role in the community. Fall painted the city in shades of gold and red, reflecting the changes the couple were experiencing in their lives. One Wednesday morning, Zuri arrived at the office of the law firm where she worked, located in the heart of Boston's financial district. She had recently been promoted to junior partner, a significant achievement that brought with it new challenges and responsibilities. Upon entering her office, Zuri was greeted by a pile of documents on her desk and a series of urgent emails. Among them, one in particular caught her eye. It was from Marcus Wheeler, an African-American colleague from a smaller office, asking for help in a case of racial discrimination at work. Zuri felt a tightness in his chest. The case was complex and politically sensitive, involving a large corporation with close ties to the firm where she worked. Accepting the case could potentially damage her career, but refusing would mean turning her back on someone who needed her help. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Ethan was facing his own challenges at the rehab center, where he worked as a lawyer and counselor. He was in a tense meeting with the board of directors, discussing a new integration program he had proposed. "Mr. Prescott," said Richard Townsend, one of the older directors, "we understand your passion for this issue, but we don't see how it aligns with our core mission." Ethan took a deep breath, trying to contain his frustration. "Our mission is to help people with disabilities reintegrate into society. This program would address the unique barriers faced by people of color with disabilities. It's crucial for our community." The discussion continued, heated and at times hostile. Ethan found himself fighting not only for the program, but against subtle prejudices and resistance to change. At the end of the day, Zuri and Ethan found themselves at home, both exhausted and emotionally drained. Sitting at the kitchen table with steaming cups of tea between them, they shared the day's events. "I don't know what to do, Ethan," Zuri confessed, his hands wrapping around the hot cup. "If I take this case, I could be risking everything I've worked for. But if I don't—" Ethan reached out, covering Zuri's hand. "You know what's right, love. The question is, are you willing to face the consequences?" Zuri nodded slowly. "And you? How did it go with the council?" Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It was difficult. Sometimes I feel like I'm swimming against the current. But I can't give up. Not now." Just then, Zuri's phone rang. It was Amara. "Zuri, you need to turn on the TV now. Channel 5. Confused, Zuri and Ethan turned on the television. On the screen, a reporter was doing a story on racial discrimination in large Boston corporations. To their shock, the name of the company involved in Marcus Wheeler's case was mentioned. "Oh my God," Zuri whispered. "This is going to explode." Ethan squeezed Zuri's hand. "It looks like your decision has just become a lot more complicated." In the days that followed, Zuri and Ethan found themselves at the center of a storm. Zuri decided to take on Marcus' case, facing veiled disapproval from some senior partners and subtle pressure to back down. Ethan, for his part, continued to fight for his program, using the media attention on discrimination issues to highlight the importance of his proposal. One evening, as they worked side by side at their dining room table turned makeshift office, Zuri looked at Ethan. "Do you ever wonder if we're doing the right thing?" she asked, her voice low and tired. Ethan stopped typing, turning to face her. "Every day," he admitted. "But then, I remember why we started this. I remember the people who count on us." Zuri smiled, feeling a wave of love and gratitude. You know, when we got married, I thought our biggest challenge would be dealing with the past. But now I see that it's building the future, day by day. Ethan leaned in, gently kissing Zuri. And we're doing it together. That's what matters. That night, while the city slept outside, Zuri and Ethan continued to work, side by side. They knew that the road ahead would be difficult, full of obstacles and moments of doubt. But they also knew that together, they had the strength to face any challenge. As fall gave way to winter, Zuri and Ethan continued their fight, not just for their careers, but for a fairer and more inclusive future. Every small victory, every moment of mutual understanding, was a step towards the world they dreamed of building, a world where love could truly overcome all barriers. Winter in Boston arrived in full force, covering the city in a white blanket of snow. For Zuri and Ethan, the cold outside contrasted with the heat of the battles they were facing in their professional and personal lives. It was a Thursday evening, and Zuri was working late in her office, immersed in the racial discrimination case she had taken on. The silence of the night was broken by a soft knock on the door. "Come in," Zuri said, without taking her eyes off the documents in front of her. "Zuri, can we talk?" The voice of Leonard Blackwell, one of the firm's senior partners, made Zuri raise his head abruptly. "Of course, Mr. Blackwell. What can I do for you?" Zuri replied, trying to keep his composure. Leonard closed the door behind him and sat down in front of Zuri's desk. "It's about the Wheeler case. Zuri, you need to understand the delicate position you're putting the firm in." Zuri felt his heart racing, but kept his voice steady. "With all due respect, Mr. Blackwell, this case is important. We can't ignore injustice just because it's inconvenient." "Inconvenient?" Leonard laughed humorlessly. "Zuri, this could cost the firm millions. Contracts, reputation. You're risking everything we've worked for." "What we work for?" Zuri repeated, his voice rising slightly. "I thought we worked for justice, Mr. Blackwell. Or does that only apply when it's convenient?" Leonard's face hardened. "Be careful, Zuri. You're talented, but you're not irreplaceable. Think carefully about what you're doing." When Leonard left, Zuri felt the full weight of his words. She picked up the phone, dialing Ethan's number with trembling hands. Meanwhile, Ethan was in a tense meeting at the rehabilitation center. His integration program had finally been approved, but with so many restrictions that it barely resembled the original proposal. "This isn't enough," Ethan argued, frustration evident in his voice. "We're only scratching the surface of the problem." Richard Townsend sighed heavily. "Mr. Prescott, we've already made more concessions than usual. Perhaps it's time to accept the victory you've achieved." Ethan was about to reply when his phone vibrated. Seeing Zuri's name on the screen, he excused himself and left the room. "Zuri? What's wrong?" Concern was evident in his voice. "Ethan, I think I'm about to lose my job," Zuri said, his voice trembling slightly. 20 minutes later, Ethan walked into Zuri's office, finding her sitting in her chair, looking out of the window at the snow-covered city. "Hey," he said softly, approaching. Zuri turned around, tears shining in her eyes. "Ethan, what are we doing? Is it worth risking everything?" Ethan knelt down beside her, taking her hands in his. "Zuri, remember what we promised? That we'd face everything together? That includes the hard times." Just then, there was a knock on the door. It was Marcus Wheeler, Zuri's client. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, sounding nervous. "Zuri, I've come to tell you that I'm withdrawing the case." "What?" Zuri and Ethan exclaimed in unison. Marcus entered, closing the door behind him. "They offered me a settlement. A good deal. They say they're going to implement new diversity policies." Zuri stood up, incredulous. "Marcus, you can't give up now. We're so close to making a real change." Marcus shook his head sadly. "Zuri, you don't understand. They've threatened my family, my wife, my children. I can't risk it." The silence that followed was deafening. Zuri felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. Ethan, realizing the gravity of the situation, stepped forward. "Marcus, What they've done is illegal. We can protect you and your family, Ethan argued. Marcus smiled sadly. Protect how? They have money, power, connections. What do we have? Zuri, recovering from the initial shock, spoke with renewed determination. We have the truth, Marcus, and we have each other. If we give up now, they've won not just this case, but all future ones. The trio spent the next few hours discussing strategies, risks, and possibilities. As the night progressed, a new resolution took shape. They weren't going to back down. They were going to fight even harder. When Marcus finally left, promising to reconsider his decision, Zuri turned to Ethan, exhausted but determined. You know, she said, when we got married, I thought our biggest challenges would be personal. But now I see that it's much bigger than us. Ethan nodded, pulling her into a hug. It is bigger, yes. But it's also exactly about us, about the world we want to build, not just for us, but for everyone. As they gazed out of the window at the sleeping city, Zuri and Ethan knew that the days ahead would be difficult. They would face opposition, threats, and moments of doubt, but they also knew that together they had the strength to persevere. Marcus Wheeler's case was no longer just a legal case. It had become a symbol of their struggle for justice and equality. And as the snow continued to fall outside, Zuri and Ethan silently renewed their commitment to each other and to the cause they had embraced. The battle was far from over, but they were ready to face it, together, as they had always promised. Spring arrived in Boston, bringing with it not only the blooming of flowers, but also an explosion of events that would change Zuri and Ethan's lives forever. It was an April morning when Zuri received an anonymous email. With trembling hands, she opened the attached file and her eyes went wide. There, in front of her, were internal documents from the company involved in Marcus Wheeler's case, irrefutable evidence of systematic discrimination and retaliation against employees who dared to speak out. "Ethan," she shouted, her voice a mixture of shock and triumph. "You need to see this." Ethan rushed to her side, and together they examined the evidence. It was the turning point they needed, but it also represented a huge risk. "Zuri," Ethan said softly, "you know what this means, don't you? If we use this, there's no turning back." Zuri nodded, his determination evident. "I know, but we can't back down now. Too many people are depending on us." In the days that followed, Zuri and his team worked tirelessly to verify the authenticity of the documents and prepare their case. Meanwhile, Ethan intensified his efforts at the rehabilitation center, using the growing media attention to highlight the needs of marginalized communities. The tension reached its peak when, a week before the trial, Zuri received a threatening phone call. "Ms. Johnson," said a deep voice on the other end of the line, "I suggest you reconsider your actions. It would be a shame if something were to happen to your promising career, or to your husband." Zuri felt the blood run cold in her veins. She immediately called Ethan, who had left everything to find her. "We can't let them intimidate us," Ethan said, hugging her tightly. "But we also need to be cautious. Let's get help." They decided to contact an investigative journalist, Samantha Rivera, known for her work on corporate corruption cases. Samantha listened carefully to their story and agreed to help, seeing the potential for impactful reporting. "This goes beyond a simple discrimination case," Samantha explained. "It's about power, corruption, and the manipulation of the legal system. We need to expose all of this." With Samantha's help, Zuri and Ethan began to build a support network. Activists, other lawyers, and even some of the company's whistleblowers joined the cause. Marcus Wheeler's case was turning into a movement. At the rehab center, Ethan was facing his own battle. His integration program was finally showing positive results, but he knew he needed to do more. "We can't settle for small victories," he argued at a board meeting. "We need to use our platform to demand systemic change." To his surprise, Richard Townsend, who had previously opposed his ideas, spoke in his support. Mr. Prescott is right. It's time we took a firmer stand. As the day of the trial approached, the pressure on Zuri and Ethan increased. They received almost daily threats, and the stress was beginning to affect their health and their relationship. One evening, exhausted after another long day of preparation, they had a heated argument. "You're putting yourself in unnecessary danger," Ethan shouted, frustration evident in his voice. "And you think what you're doing is any different?" Zuri retorted. "We're in this together, remember?" The silence that followed was heavy. Finally, Ethan spoke, his voice softer. "I'm sorry. I'm just afraid of losing you." Zuri moved closer, gently touching his face. "I'm afraid too, Ethan, but we can't let fear paralyze us. Not now." On the eve of the trial, Zuri and Ethan gathered everyone involved at their home. Marcus Wheeler, Samantha Rivera, the legal team, activists. Everyone was there, united by a common purpose. "Tomorrow," Zuri began, his voice firm, "we're not just fighting for a case. We're fighting for the future we want to see. A future of equality, justice, and dignity for all." Ethan continued, "We know the stakes are high, but together we are stronger than any corporation, any corrupt system." Marcus Wheeler, who had been so hesitant at the beginning, was now on the front line. "You gave me courage," he said, moved, "not just to fight for myself, but for everyone who will come after me." As the evening progressed, the group finalized their plans. Samantha was preparing to publish her explosive report simultaneously with the start of the trial. Activists organized peaceful protests outside the courthouse. The legal team reviewed their strategies one last time. When everyone left, Zuri and Ethan stood alone, holding hands, looking out of the window at the city they loved. "No matter what happens tomorrow," Zuri said softly, "I'm proud of us, of what we've become, of what we're fighting for." Ethan pulled her close, kissing her softly. "I love you, Zuri, and together we can do anything." As they prepared for bed, they both knew that the next day would mark a before and after in their lives. The trial wasn't just about a discrimination case. It was about redefining what was possible when brave people united for a cause greater than themselves. With hearts full of determination and a little fear, Zuri and Ethan fell asleep, ready to face whatever the dawn brought. The final chapter of their journey was about to begin, and they were prepared to write it together, with courage, love, and an unshakable faith in the power of change. The dawn in Boston brought with it a palpable energy. The streets around the federal courthouse were packed with people, some carrying signs, others simply watching, all aware that they were about to witness a historic moment. Zuri and Ethan arrived early, hands intertwined, faces determined. As they walked up the steps of the courthouse, they were greeted by a wave of applause and shouts of support. Marcus Wheeler was waiting for them at the top, his face a mixture of nervousness and resolve. "Are we ready for this?" Marcus asked, his voice trembling. Zuri smiled, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "More than ready. It's time to make history." Inside the courtroom, the air was charged with tension. Judge Thomas Reeves, known for his impartiality, was presiding over the case. On the opposite side, a team of elite corporate lawyers, led by the imposing Lawrence Hartley, was preparing for a fierce battle. When Zuri stood up to make her opening statement, she felt the weight of thousands of hopes on her shoulders. Taking a deep breath, she began, "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is not just about Marcus Wheeler. It's about every person who has ever been silenced, marginalized, or discriminated against because of the color of their skin. It's about the future we want to build for our children." As the trial progressed, witness after witness corroborated Marcus' story. Former employees, diversity experts, even a former company executive who decided to tell the truth. Each testimony was a stone in the foundation of the case Zuri was building. On the outside, Ethan coordinated public awareness efforts. He gave interviews, organized discussions, and ensured that the story was told fairly and comprehensively. His personal experience, as a white man married to a black woman and fighting prejudice, resonated with many. On the fourth day of the trial, Samantha Rivera published her investigative report. The impact was immediate and devastating. The company's shares plummeted, and public pressure reached unprecedented levels. Lawrence Hartley, feeling the case slipping through his fingers, made one last desperate move. During the break, he approached Zuri in the corridors of the courthouse. "Ms. Johnson," he said, his voice an urgent whisper, "perhaps we can reach an agreement, something that benefits everyone." Zuri stared at him, her eyes shining with determination. "Mr. Hartley, we're not here for money or deals. We're here for justice." When the verdict finally came, after days of intense deliberation, the silence in the courtroom was deafening. Judge Reeves cleared his throat and began to read. In the case of Wheeler v. XYZ Corporation, this court finds the defendant guilty of systematic racial discrimination and retaliation against employees. The room erupted in a mixture of applause, tears, and shouts of joy. Zuri hugged Marcus, both of them crying openly. Ethan rushed to their side, enveloping them in a tight hug. But the victory in court was only the beginning. In the months that followed, Zuri and Ethan found themselves at the center of a national movement for corporate change and racial equality. They traveled the country, sharing their story and inspiring others to speak out against injustice. Ethan's Rehabilitation Center became a national model for inclusion and diversity. Companies across the country sought his guidance to implement more equitable policies. Zuri, meanwhile, was asked to lead a new division in her law firm, focused exclusively on civil rights and social justice cases. Her courage had not only saved her career, but transformed the entire culture of the firm. A year after the historic verdict, Zuri and Ethan were back on Martha's Vineyard, the place where their journey of self-discovery had truly begun. Sitting on the beach, watching the sunset, they reflected on everything they had been through. "Did you ever think we'd get this far?" Zuri asked, her head resting on Ethan's shoulder. Ethan smiled, kissing her forehead softly. "Honestly? No. But with you by my side, I feel like we can do anything." At that moment, Zuri felt a movement in her belly. She took Ethan's hand and placed it on her slightly rounded belly. "Our future," she whispered, tears of joy in her eyes. Ethan hugged her tighter, overcome with emotion. "Our legacy," he replied. As the sun set over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Zuri and Ethan knew that their journey was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. With a child on the way, they had a new mission: to create a world where love truly overcame all barriers. The Wheeler case had been a turning point, not just in their lives, but in the conscience of a nation. It was a powerful reminder that when people of goodwill unite for a just cause, real and lasting change is possible. As the stars began to dot the night sky, Zuri and Ethan remained embraced, grateful for the path they had traveled and hopeful for the future they were helping to shape. Their love, tested by the fire of adversity and strengthened by shared determination, was a beacon of hope for all who knew them. And so, in the stillness of that summer evening on Martha's Vineyard, a new chapter opened, not just for Zuri and Ethan, but for all those who dreamed of a fairer, more equal world. Their legacy of love, courage, and commitment to justice would continue to inspire generations to come, proving that indeed, love can overcome all barriers. If you discovered a painful family secret that challenged your current values and beliefs, such as Ethan's family's racist past, how would you deal with it? Would you face the truth openly, even if it could cost you relationships and your reputation? Or would you try to bury the past in the name of family and social harmony? Leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.